We're here on stage at the Cadogan Hall in Sloane Square in London, and just before a concert which is being conducted by Grzegorz Nowak, who is very kindly giving us a few moments to talk just before the concert about how he conducts and his relationship with the musicians during a concert. If we can go all the way back, because you started off as a musician, or you learned music. Nobody becomes a conductor straight away, do they? They always have something happens beforehand.
Yes.
What were your first steps into it?
Well, you see, I was the most boring kid to play with in kindergarten, because everybody wanted to be somebody else every day, you know, a policeman, a firefighter or something, and I wanted to be a musician. And that's because my father was an organist, my grandfather was an organist, it was a family tradition. Even when I was a teenager, I was an organist. I just knew that this is what I was born to be, you know, and indeed, they changed all the professions they chose. I stuck to this one.
Oh, so they wanted you to be something else. What did they want you to be?
Well, I mean, my colleagues, you know, firefighter or policeman or something. I wanted to be a musician, and I became. But, of course, I started as a violinist. I studied the violin, and in fact, when I was a student, I was a concertmaster already with the opera. We played in La Scala even. And it was, when I graduated, I was offered the orchestra in Poland, so I was the youngest music director, and just took over. Then I won the competition in Geneva, and the international orchestras were inviting me, so here I am.
Now, you mentioned your parents were musicians as well.
Well, my father, grandfather.
Was there a lot of pressure on you to become a musician? They didn't sort of say, right, you've got to go off and start doing your rehearsals now. You've got to go and practice every night for an hour or something. That didn't happen.
No, but I just had this call. My younger siblings liked music, but they didn't become musicians.
So do you think it's important that you have a sense of drive, that you push yourself forward in music? Is that the best way?
Well, you have to practice. That's the secret. I mean, apart from the talent, you need to work all the time. And even the big orchestras like the Royal Philharmonic, they have to have their rehearsals. The wonderful orchestra as it is, they will have only one rehearsal, but they will be prepared before they come to the rehearsal. They know everything. So it's a joy and pleasure to work with them, because they realize everything so fast and so wonderfully. But they work.
Now, you mentioned the preparation there. It's not just the musicians that have to prepare. You have to prepare probably 10 times as more, because you have to go through every part of the score to fully understand what was going on. How do you approach that?
Well, you need to study scores. You need to learn all the sounds and everything you want. And if you have some concept, you want to be able to convey it to the orchestra and convince the players that this is what they should do. On top of this, you have to, having very little time, you have to be able to convey much of it with your gestures, rather than just explaining everything. You cannot write a thesis when you only have 3-hour rehearsal. You have to be able to do it very quickly. And the orchestra like this is a fantastic instrument for those purposes, because they just pick up everything in a flash.
You mentioned a concept. Whose concept? Is this a concept that is coming from your head, or is it something that's coming from Brahms, for example? Or is it a concept that has come from historical repetition? Because I guess unless you actually went out there and met Brahms, you're not entirely sure where he was going with it or what he intended.
Well, you need to absorb all of this. So every musician, each composer takes from the composer's generations before and puts on top of it. But the approach, of course, which I adopt is I try to find what, in my opinion, or my imagination, the composer wanted to do. And, of course, as many conductors as there are, or as many musicians as there are, everybody will have a little different opinion here and there. But it doesn't deviate too much from the original score. That's the source. And that's what we all try to do, just to give the interpretation which would be as close as I could imagine Brahms' ideas was in case of Brahms or any other composer.
Do you get that totally from the score, or do you have to do some reading around it as well? Do you try and find out what was going on at the time?
You need to do all of this. You need to know what's the tradition, what has been done before, what were other conductors doing, other orchestras were doing, and by choices and elimination, you come up to what you like the best. And then, the most important for me is just to study the score without anything, without music, so that I could imagine how I would like the sound of oboe or clarinet and the phrase to go, and then just convey it. But you see, again, this orchestra is so wonderful that even if they play the work 100 times with 100 different interpretations, and you ask something else, they will play it as if they played it this way all the time. They will put their heart into it, and it's just a creation which happens on stage at the concert, which is such a wonderful feeling. There are not many orchestras like that.
You've had experience, obviously, of European tradition and, of course, the American tradition. Is there a huge difference between the two?
Well, the best American orchestras are trying to absorb everything which comes from European tradition, so it's very, very similar. When I was studying in Poland, there was one particular thing about orchestras which we were always told, specifically that no other orchestras can read music as well as American orchestras and London orchestras, just like this. And after a while we believed that, well, those people must have had some talents which we on the continent just don't have. It was only when I was in America and then here that I learned, well, musicians simply take the music 1 month before the concert and they practice. And even if it's a completely new piece and very difficult, when they come to the rehearsal, they just know everything. They can play it from the beginning to the end without stopping, all right? Which is very typical for those major American orchestras and for London orchestras because there's just no time to have many rehearsals.
So what does that give you more time to do? If, for example, we're in your natural home right now, we've got the podium just behind you here.
Right.
When you stand in front of the orchestra for the first time at the start of rehearsals and perhaps go through a run-through of some of the phrases or something, you think, right, I've got a lot of work to do, or I don't have very much work to do, or I can spend more time focusing in on perhaps some of the concept that you were talking about.
Right. Well, you need to manage your rehearsal time. If you have a week of rehearsals, like typically on the continent, you can space your rehearsals and get into details gradually, day by day. If you only have one rehearsal, you have to pick what's the most important and make the best out of it. And with the orchestras like the Royal Philharmonic, the starting point is already so high that it's like after 5 rehearsals on the continent.
Is there a particular genre of music that you focus in on? Because I was looking down at some of the concerts that you've performed over the recent years. Do you tend towards more European music or Russian music, or do you have favourites, I suppose, is what I'm asking?
Oh, I love all the good music, so I do a lot of modern music as well, and of course I love Russian music, I love German music, Italian music, French music. It all depends on the programming, which often is governed by very different options. Like in London, you have so many good orchestras performing every week, so you have to avoid the conflict with other orchestras. You have to make sure that you have the program which is attractive enough to attract the audience, and so on. So the choices are not only what I would like to do, it's also what the audience would like to do, doesn't have the same duplication with the other orchestra, and so on.
Just going back to when you're rehearsing, I mean, you have to use your entire body, I'm guessing, when you're communicating with the musicians. Is that a necessity if you're conducting, or are there some conductors who?
Yes, there are some conductors and some very good conductors who don't use the entire body. It's the way just I express my feelings but Bernstein was telling us that when he became music director with the New York Philharmonic, one of the first conductors he invited was Reiner, who was one of his masters. And Reiner's technique was that he held the baton upwards in front of his body with very small gestures and just having contact with eyes. And the New York Philharmonic played an excellent concert, but the reviewer wrote the next day that last night New York Philharmonic played a wonderful concert all by themselves, and nobody knows what this guy was doing in front of them, because for the audience, he was like standing and doing nothing from the back. They couldn't see the baton, they couldn't see the eyes, and after Bernstein, who was all over the podium, it looked like, well, he was doing nothing. But that's of course not true, and what's important is how musicians will react to your gestures, to your communication. And it worked for Fritz Reiner, worked very well, and he was an excellent conductor.
On that point, are you very conscious of the audience while you're conducting?
No, actually, it's one thing which makes you conscious. It's the contact between the orchestra and the audience. It's different than if you even made the same kind of run through in the rehearsal with the empty hall. There is some magic which connects the audience and musicians. You can feel that, but that's the end of it. Otherwise, I'm completely in the music. It's like I connect with Brahms if I contact Brahms and try to get the orchestra to do it together.